It was the night of February 28, 2026. In the darkness of the night, when Tehran was in a deep sleep, suddenly, fire began raining from the sky. One terrifying explosion after another. Buildings started shaking. Iran's most powerful figures were gathered in a secret meeting, and right at that very meeting, US and Israeli missiles struck. Within moments, Iran's entire top leadership was reduced to ashes. But what happened next, no one could have imagined, not even in their worst nightmares. Iran did not collapse. It did not break. Instead, it launched a counterattack so powerful that it shocked the entire world. US military bases across Saudi Arabia, Kuwait, Qatar, and the UAE were hit by waves of missiles. The Strait of Hormuz, the most critical artery of global energy supply, was shut down. And now, the United States, the world's most powerful military force, was suddenly pushed onto the back foot. This is not just the story of a battle. This is the story of decades of dirty politics, broken promises, and a truth that many people simply refuse to see. Today, we are going to expose that truth. Let's go back in history. The year is 1950. At that time, Iran had so much oil that it alone could shake the entire global energy system. Around 16% of crude oil, 31% of refined products, and up to 67% of bunker fuel used by Western nations came from Iranian land. But who was truly benefiting from this massive wealth? Britain. The land was Iran's, the oil was Iran's, the labor was Iranian, but the profits were flowing straight to London. This injustice planted the seeds of rebellion deep within Iran. In 1951, Mohammad Mossadegh became the Prime Minister of Iran. He made a historic decision that shook the West. He nationalized Iran's oil. This meant that the profits would now go to the Iranian people, not Britain. But Mossadegh had no idea what kind of storm he had just invited. The US and Britain could not accept this. Britain was facing direct financial loss, and the US feared that Mossadegh might align with the Soviet Union, so they launched a secret mission, Operation Ajax. The CIA and MI6 worked together to remove Mossadegh from power. He was imprisoned, and Shah Mohammad Reza Pahlavi was installed as the ruler, a leader completely under US influence. Think about the irony. The United States, which claims to promote democracy worldwide, crushed a democratically elected leader. This is where the hatred began. Death to America, a slogan that still echoes in Iran today. Now, Iran became a pawn for the US, a buffer state between the Middle East and the Soviet Union. To strengthen this relationship, in 1957, the US introduced the Atom for Peace program. A nuclear research center was built in Tehran. Iranian scientists were trained at MIT. Here's the shocking truth. The very nuclear technology that the US is spending billions to destroy today was originally given to Iran by the US itself. Coincidence or something much deeper? Now, fast forward to 1971. At that time, the US dollar was backed by gold, $35 per ounce. But when countries like France began demanding gold instead of dollars, doubts arose if the US actually had enough reserves. On August 15, 1971, President Nixon made a historic announcement. The dollar would no longer be backed by gold. This became known as the Nixon shock. The credibility of the dollar began to collapse. The US needed a solution, and fast. In 1974, the US made a deal with Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia would sell oil only in US dollars. In return, the US would guarantee the security of the Saudi royal family. Within a year, all OPEC nations agreed, and this is how the petrodollar system was born. Now, demand for oil meant demand for dollars, and demand for dollars meant US dominance over the world. Every conflict in the Middle East traces back to this. Any country that tried to sell oil in another currency became an enemy of the US. Saddam Hussein tried selling oil in euros. His fate is well known. Muammar Gaddafi proposed a gold-backed African currency. He was eliminated too. Remember this. It connects directly to what comes next. Now, the year is 1979, a massive shock for the US. Iran, the US's most trusted ally in the Middle East, underwent an Islamic revolution led by Ayatollah Khomeini. The Shah was overthrown, the US embassy was stormed, and American diplomats were taken hostage. In a single moment, decades of US strategy collapsed. Khomeini declared that the revolution would not stop at Iran. He openly challenged the royal families of Saudi Arabia, Bahrain, and the UAE, calling them puppets of the US. This terrified the Gulf nations and pushed them even closer to the US. Now, the US had only one goal: remove Khomeini. But Iran was too large and powerful for a direct attack. So in 1980, the US supported Saddam Hussein in the Iran-Iraq War. The US knew Iraq was using chemical weapons on Iranian civilians, yet it provided battle planning and billions in support. The result? An 8-year-long war. No winner, no loser. But Iran was deeply scarred. Chemical bombs fell on its people, innocents died in agony, and the world remained silent. Iran repeatedly went to the United Nations. No one listened. This period taught Iran one harsh truth: the US is not a temporary enemy, and Iran must fight alone. Think about it. If this happened to your country, what would you do? In 1989, Khomeini died, and Ali Khamenei took power. Surrounded by US-backed nations and constant threats, Iran adopted a new strategy: proxy warfare. It began supporting groups like Hamas in Palestine, Hezbollah in Lebanon, and the Houthis in Yemen. Iran positioned itself as the defender of oppressed Muslims, and this gained it widespread sympathy. At the same time, it revived its nuclear program. Secret uranium enrichment began in Natanz and Iraq. This remained hidden until 2002. Now, understand this. Natural uranium contains less than 1% U-235. Enrichment increases this percentage. 3 to 5% is used for electricity, but at 90%, it becomes a nuclear weapon. In 2003, after the US removed Saddam Hussein and labeled Iran as part of the axis of evil, Iran felt completely surrounded. US forces in Iraq, US forces in Afghanistan. Iran realized countries on the US hit list do not survive, except one: North Korea. Why? Because it has nuclear weapons. That was the turning point. Iran decided if it wants to survive, it must build a nuclear bomb. Under President Ahmadinejad, enrichment accelerated deep underground. The US and Israel tried to stop it. They deployed the Stuxnet virus. Iran's nuclear machines were destroyed. Scientists were assassinated. Bombs in cars, mysterious disappearances. But Iran did not stop, because for them, stopping meant dying. In 2009, Obama imposed sanctions. Iran's economy collapsed. Finally, in 2015, the JCPOA deal was signed. Iran agreed to limit enrichment to 3.67%. The world felt relief. But in 2018, Trump withdrew from the deal. Iran returned to its path. On April 11, 2021, Israel attacked Iran's Natanz facility. Iran responded by increasing enrichment to 60%. By March 2023, the IAEA reported that Iran's breakout time was just 12 days. And then came June 2025. Trump returned to power. A 60-day ultimatum was issued. On June 22, 2025, Operation Midnight Hammer. U.S. B-2 bombers dropped massive bunker buster bombs. Trump declared Iran's nuclear program destroyed. But the truth, Iran had already moved its enriched uranium days before the attack. And that brings us back to February 28, 2026. Operation Epic Fury.
The U.S. eliminated Iran's top leadership. They believed Iran would surrender, but Iran had already prepared. The Mosaic Doctrine. The country was divided into 31 command zones. If central leadership falls, each commander acts independently. The result? No single leader to negotiate with. 31 commands launched coordinated attacks. The Middle East ignited. U.S. bases were attacked. The Strait of Hormuz was blocked. 20% of global oil supply stopped. India lost 50% of its energy supply. Japan lost 80%. Iran also targeted desalination plants and underwater internet cables. And here's the real problem for the U.S. It is spending $4 million missiles to stop $1,000 drones. This is not just war, it's economic warfare. And Iran's geography, its mountains, protect it naturally. So now the biggest question. After decades of agreements, attacks, assassinations, and destruction, what is this war really about? Oil? Dollar dominance? Or something deeper? Today, the world stands on the edge of a dangerous turning point. If this escalates, it could lead to nuclear war, and people like you and me will suffer for something we never caused. This is not just news. This is the reality of a system that has controlled the world for decades and is now beginning to shake. So tell me, who do you think is truly responsible for all this destruction? The US, Israel, Iran, or the entire corrupt system? This was today's bitter truth. No bomb, no missile can erase the power of truth. And even if people refuse to see it, we will keep speaking it. Take care of yourself and never stop listening to the truth.